Looks like we're up.
Twitch side is.
All right, guys. I think we're live here. This is the first edition of the Retro Roundtable podcast. So I am Bob from RetroRGB.com. I have a podcast that I do weekly, and this is going to be nothing like that. This is by nerds for nerds, talking about very specific things in the retro gaming community that we want to talk about. We want to get everybody involved, and also try to have some fun as well. So I guess I'll just do a quick introduction and pass it along. Bob from RetroRGB. I like beer, long walks on the beach, heavy metal, and whatever else. I guess I'll pass it on to Renee, who's way up in the Great White North fighting meese and drinking bad bacon. Or right? What's up, Renee?
No. I'm Renee from DB Electronics. I especially enjoy India Pale Ale, and I do fight beasts. Horrid polar bears.
I said meese. That's the plural for mooses, right?
I know, but I said beasts. There's bears up here.
Gotcha. I guess next we get Steve. We're going around the circle.
Hey, I'm Steve Kulov from HD Retrovision. I don't know. I guess my drink of choice is the drink of champions, which is the White Monster. I just bought a 10-pack, so I think we're pretty good for a while.
A couple hours.
All right, Nick.
Yeah, I'm Nick, also from HD Retrovision. I'm proud today to be an American, as I got this gigantic cup of coffee and a donut for $1. So that was pretty cool.
There you go.
Did you put those caffeine shots that they give you for free?
I did not see that there.
Oh,
That's
yeah, they're
terrifying.
dangerous.
All right, Zach, you're up next.
The smoke is for dramatic effect. I'm the great Voultar, champion of life.
There you go. You also have a website and shit.
I have a website, Voultar.com. What else can I tell you? That's all.
With a great logo.
Yep.
With a beautiful logo.
So because this is our first one, this one's going to be, I guess, a little bit tamer. We're just going to go into some technical stuff, and really, we just kind of wanted to do this just as a way for people who follow the retro gaming stuff and who get into tech. Now there's a way for us to get a little more technical and not worry about the general masses. This is for all the nerds, and we want to really jump into it and go over a bunch of stuff that will help everybody and talk about problems that we continuously have. And hopefully everybody enjoys it.
Just to add on to that, like, it is kind of interesting how this all came about. I was talking to Steve and saying to him, like, man, it'd be great if, there's all these people in this community that, we're all kind of off on our own corners working on little things, and it'd be really nice if we got together, like, at least once a year and talked and, maybe coordinated on some things. And he's like, well, getting in person together is kind of tough, so why don't we see if we could do this maybe once a month and just Skype. And then I threw that idea over to Bob, and he's like, dude, I was thinking the same thing, I was thinking about reaching out to you about this already. And so that kind of came together, and we figured, well, if we're gonna get all together and talk, why don't we just record it and let other people listen, and maybe they'll learn something, or they'll have questions for us and they can add to the conversation. So it's kind of the background of this whole thing. It's come together over the last month.
Yep.
Right.
So basically, I guess we'll just start out talking about different things, and anybody who wants to chime in. A bunch of us are following on YouTube and Twitch, and obviously, if there's any technical problems or something, start posting. And just, I believe there's like a 30-second delay for anybody posting anything or talking. So, who wants to start us out then? Nick, you want to go?
Sure. So as we kind of put this together, one of the things we wanted to do is, as part of the roundtable, was just everyone go around and maybe talk about something they're working on lately, or something interesting that they've learned, something kind of technical to share with people. And so kind of is my part of that. One of the things that I've been very interested in lately kind of stem back to some conversations that I was having with Voultar, because he had sent us some pictures of OSSC output that was comparing the 480p output to the 720p. And why was the 720p output looking so much better? So, as far as an answer to that, that kind of generated some theories in my head, and I think Steve kind of had some of the same thoughts, which was why are certain ratios of, if you're playing on a 1080 screen, is 720 going to necessarily look better than 480? Is 480 necessarily going to look better than 240? So I started putting together some theories, and I kind of came to the at least hypothesis that 240 might actually look better than 480, potentially. I think I've potentially proven that theory wrong. So it's kind of something that I'm still investigating and still interested in exploring a little more. But kind of the whole reason for why this comes down to the way upsampling is done on a TV. So if you want to upscale a 240 signal to 1080, you have to upsample by a factor of 9 and then downsample by a factor of 2. And with 480 signal, you have to upsample by a factor of 9 and then down by a factor of 4. And so kind of my theory was that downsampling part being bigger for the 480 might actually result in some kind of weirdness to the 480 image. And that's still something I want to explore a little more in depth. Whereas like the 720, that's a very simple upsample by 3, downsample by 2. You're not changing that image that much. It's kind of a pretty simple process there. So that's kind of my theory. It's what I'm working on. I want to explore that a bit more in the future, and maybe next month I'll have some interesting results to show.
Doesn't the processor built into the TV itself have such a huge bearing on what those results are?
I don't know if it's. I would say it's the processor itself, but the way it's doing the upsampling might. So in signal processing theory, you have this digital signal. There are filters in there in between these steps. So you if you're going to blow up something by 2, the first thing you do is add a 0 sample in between every original sample that you have, and then you run a filter across the signal that fills in those gaps. And so depending on what filter you choose to do that, it may result in different things. So
like what Bob said, that's going to be TV dependent.
It's going to be TV dependent, but not it's not that you necessarily need an amazing processor to do a great upsampling job. You just need to choose the algorithm smartly. And so that's, that really harkens to why the products like the OSSC and FrameMeister result in upsampled images that look better than what your TV does. Is they're actually choosing a specific type of filter that a TV would never want to choose, because it would make every other piece of content that you wanted to blow up your DVDs, it would make that stuff look bad. But retro,
that's definitely
the 16-bit
something
stuff specific.
Yeah, that's something we should definitely keep looking into, because I know there's a lot of arguments online about people have said, well, TVs, there's no difference in lag between resolutions, everything's the same. And I never got to go to Best Buy and go through all the TVs. I moved before I could do that. But, I know for sure that different TVs have accepted signals different ways. And I know when I put a 240p image into my plasma and a 480p through the OSSC, even if I use the HD Retrovision cables and went through, it's identical, because my TV just happens to do a great job with 240p signals. But then, of course, you put it through a FrameMeister in 1080p, it is definitely sharper to me. But I've seen so many different results across flat screen TVs. I don't even know where I would begin to start recording any of these. I'm sure you guys have done way more testing than me as well with these things.
We have, but I don't know that we have. We've done enough to have a sense that that becomes like a real headache to the problem. Like we don't have like a recording of all the results, but we've seen enough different results that we know that it's very hard to generalize about this problem. You cannot say that on every TV a 480p signal is going to look better than a 240p signal, for instance. I mean that's very hard to generalize.
I might be talking on a turn here, but I think I would also say that on a 1080p TV, you couldn't also say that 720 is going to definitively look better than 480p because it really depends on how it handles.
Probably not generalizable. Like, yeah, that's probably not true always. It should if it's done well, but I don't know that that's a guarantee.
But I've tested some really bad TVs, so I've seen some terrible results in that. All right, so I guess the five of us have some homework to do. We should all just put a couple signals through our TVs, have our cameras on a tripod, and snap pictures and just see if we can tell a difference just for the hell of it.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I want Steve to build me a little device that we've kind of talked about that just has some test patterns and a couple buttons on it that could switch between resolutions and test patterns, and then I can just take this like kind of little dongle and walk around a Costco and test things out and jot things down. But it's not high priority. We have other things on our to-do list, so I don't know when we'll get around to that.
I think Voultar volunteered to take actual consoles and a cart and wheel that around the Walmart.
Oh, yeah.
But I would love to do that with any of you guys. If we could all just like find a medium place and meet somewhere. I was dead set on doing that, and then once I moved, I didn't have the time, and now I live far away from any place I could do that in. But I think it would be awesome if like we knew somebody that was a manager at like a Best Buy that would let us in an hour or two early, and we could just take our
I have
beefy little
connections
cart.
at Walmart's.
I have connections
at Walmart's. So I was going to take a cart. And a big old fat 12-volt battery. I was going to put it on a cart. I was going to take like a Super Nintendo and a Genesis. And I was going to do 240 HDMI and 240 component tests on the plethora of TVs that they have. And does HDMI does it handle progressive properly? Does component handle progressive properly? What's the input lag on the HDMI? What's the input lag on the progressive? I was going to do all that stuff. So you could somewhat start to make kind of a comprehensive database, so you would know, or at least people would know, what to kind of look out for when they're buying a TV.
Yeah, I think
would it not be feasible to take a Raspberry Pi and just program a bunch of different video modes in it and try some of that?
I don't know if I'd trust the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, that one's a little tricky.
Yeah, my inherent distrust for analog. I don't know if I would trust the Super Nintendo refresh rate.
It's like 60 and 9 hertz.
Like 60.0809.
Yeah. I don't know. Could you do that with a Pi? Could you?
I know you can do a lot with the video modes in the config file.
In the analog out, yeah.
In the HDMI one too, because you can. I have this little 7-inch panel that doesn't work with anything else but one specific video mode that I program in the Pi.
Okay, though that's interesting. The thing Nick was talking about was I suggested doing it in an FPGA because I know how to generate that stuff in an FPGA.
It would be interesting. What would be an interesting test is if you could replicate the refresh of the Super Nintendo or the NES even with the Pi, and then take the Pi, once you do that, to a TV that doesn't get along with the Super Nintendo over a certain input, and see if it doesn't get along too. And if it doesn't get along like a Super Nintendo does, that may at least tell you that may be a good testing piece.
Because you could run a Pi off of a good cell phone battery charger, so that would
sure.
Good job.
Yeah, it'll
Renee.
save you from dragging around consoles everywhere.
Well done, Renee. Good idea.
It's a good idea.
You better get on that, Renee.
Well, just for that, Renee, you've won. You
get
to go next.
Yeah. Go for it, Renee. You're up.
Yep.
It's me? Okay. Well, what I wanted to talk about, and I did mention it a bit on the podcast with Bob a couple of weeks ago, but I'm really excited, so I want to talk about it some more, is that a lot of PC Engine consoles get hacked up with the region mod, right? Where people hack up the Hue card connector and they change the orientation of the data bus, right, from D0 to D7 and so on. And to remedy that, I had made a region converter a long time ago, like almost 3 years ago. Yeah, that's the date on here. Yeah. And it was such a pain in the ass to build that I stopped building it. But then I got these new HuCard connectors that are perfect, right? They're manufactured specifically for HuCards. And I was super excited when I saw these, so I decided I'm going to revive the modless region converter for PC Engine and TurboGrafx to put Voultar out of business. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, sorry, this is live.
We're going to get letters.
Yeah, we just lost the family-friendly advertisers.
Sorry, guys.
Thanks, buddy.
But an update on that since the last podcast is I've actually got a 2.3 millimeter PCB manufactured. It's still in China, but they sent me pictures. It looks really good. And it should be arriving here, in a week or two. I do live in the North Pole, so it might take a bit longer. But I definitely going to post a lot of updates about that on my website, on Twitter and whatnot, because I'm really excited to get that out in the field and prevent people from hacking up their consoles for no reason. Because a lot of the stuff that I make is specifically modless for people, not generally me, but for people who don't necessarily want to modify their consoles, who want to keep them in original condition. I think that's a big argument for a lot of people.
I think that thing's going to be excellent too, because the devices that exist that do that haven't been made in 20 years, those things can sell for $100, $150, $200 even. So it's kind of nice to see a product like that back. That's not invasive. I think that's excellent.
Agreed.
Yeah, and when I was talking to the manufacturer of this thing, he was very apologetic about how expensive this connector was. And then I said, well, just give me a quote for 100. Say I'll buy 100 off of you, and it cost $6. And I thought, whoa, that's excellent, right?
That's so expensive.
That
in
converter goes
retrospective,
both ways, right?
Pardon?
Your thing will let you play regions in both directions, right?
Yeah, that's right. If you want to play a TurboGrafx game in a PC Engine console, all you need is to flip the data bus. But if you want to do the reverse, if you want to put an American game in a Japanese console, No, I think I'm confusing myself here.
The American console is D0 to D7 on the data bus, and the Japanese system it's just inverted. So it goes from D7 to D0.
Yeah, no, but I think it's the US cards try to read which version of console they're on, and they'll refuse to boot on the other console.
No, that's the Japanese system, and
that's the Japanese one. Okay.
Yeah, because you have to ground pin 29 of the 65 or the NEC equivalent to circumvent that part of the copy protection in the Japanese system.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So can you tell I've been out of this for 2 years now? So what I've done was, in a Game Genie kind of way, I discovered with the help of a guy from Chicago that you can fool the console into thinking that it's one region or the other by just intercepting a few opcodes. So, like Nick said, the converter is absolutely universal. It'll work in any console with any game from the other region.
That's pretty dope.
That's very cool.
Yeah, and we were kind of shocked too, because we looked at the string of opcodes that does the region detection, and we thought, well, some companies will probably do it, this way. Some companies will probably do it that way. But what we found is that there's a string of about 8 opcodes that is identical in all games. So we said, oh, this is great. So this is boilerplate code that NEC was giving out with their dev kits. But then we thought, well, maybe this string surely comes up in graphics data at random in a whole bunch of different places, right? So we ran a script across the entire PC Engine library, and lucky for us, that string of data doesn't come up anywhere. So it makes it possible. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, how do you like those odds?
Yeah, nice.
Well done. Well done, sir.
Right, so I want to pass it on to who's next?
I guess I'll go next. I guess one of the many things I've kind of been working on the side was one of our customers for the component cables had a question about that vertical line on Super Nintendo that's in the middle of the screen, where it's like a different amount of contrast versus everything else on in the screen.
Infamous white line down the center.
The white line of death.
Right, and there's so many different ways that people try to reduce them or get rid of them, but no definitive
vertical
so
bar
far.
of doom.
Right, and the customer he forwarded me a link to a forum somewhere, and it seemed like the most common fix was to put big electrolytic capacitors everywhere on the power rail, and the I guess the justification for that was what's happening in that spot on the screen is that the DRAM is refreshing and it's pulling a lot of current. And so to minimize the voltage droop that happens when a lot of current gets pulled during that refresh time, you have big caps everywhere to supply enough extra charge during that period. And right when I heard that, I thought, well, instead of just preventing the droop caused by a current limit, why don't you just get rid of the current limit, the thing that's causing it in the first place? And so I was looking online, and the normal voltage regulator inside the SNES is a 7805 without any letter between the 8 and the O, which meant it's, I think by default, it's either like a 1 amp or 2 amp current limit inside. ST Microelectronics, they make a 78S05, which has a 2 amp current limit. And so I bought a couple of these, and all I did was change the voltage regulator to this higher current limit part, because my idea was, like, instead of just slapping together capacitors everywhere, just stop the current limiting from happening in the first place. And I got pretty decent results on reducing that vertical line just by replacing the part. And so it fits in the same spot as the other part, and you don't have to do any hack wiring anywhere. And so, I don't know, that's just something I came across. I was wondering if more people can try it out. The only issue is a month after I used this part, it went end of life. So this is the the part number is L, like Larry, 78S05CV, Cat, Victor, dash DG, David Goliath. And the DG means dual gauge, which that's the gauge of the metal tab. And
so does this still require that heatsink then, if it has the metal tab?
Right, that's the reason why I got the DG, because that's the same thickness of the tab as the original, and I didn't want to deal with any thermal changes. Mm-hmm. ST sells a single gauge, which has a thinner tab, and that's not end of life. And it's possible you could use that as well. I just didn't want to have to deal with doing temperature measurements and making sure that all the thermals are okay. But I mean, the part is still available. It just was announced that it was end of life.
I actually think doing thermal testing would probably be worthwhile, because there was that one 7805 replacement people had suggested trying out that didn't require a heatsink. And I guess a lot of people had good results, but other people said one person tried it on a NES and said they got like wavy diagonal lines across the screen or something. But that was one that didn't need a heatsink, which I thought was kind of neat. But I guess you can't have both.
Yeah, there's a lot of ripple. There's a lot of ripple in the power, because you can use those. You just need to put a good inductor on there, and that'll take that what you see typically out of the picture. But I don't like those either.
Yeah, I've never heard of. I'm not too familiar with like doing these types of mods. It sounds like, was that just an LDO then? So
it's just a low volt. Yeah, it's just a low dropout.
Okay.
I
So it's an
tried one
LDO.
on a SNES Mini and it worked fine. I mean, it worked for a year, and that was my main console, and I never saw any weird issues. But other people said that it's hit or miss. It depends on a lot of things, and it's generally not recommended to use that, I guess.
Yeah, I'd be very cautious about not using the heatsink, because these are all linear regulators. The way they get from the 9 volt down to the 5 volt is they burn up that extra voltage as heat.
Yes, and I mean, I would say if you're using an LDO in there, the purpose of an LDO is to have a lower input voltage, and if your input voltage is still 9 volt, you're not really gaining anything.
Right, it's supposed to be more efficient. I just wondered, Steve, did you The theory of the refresh pulses of the RAM shooting a very fast amp load. Has anyone ever looked at that on a scope to measure?
I don't think so. I don't know.
To see if it is spiking.
I don't know. I have not done it myself, and I usually
I'll do it for you.
Don't do it, so
I'm gonna do it for your body.
Yeah, I mean, this was just something I had a little time to look into because I thought it was odd that okay, if it's DRAM refreshes, let's just stop the current limiting from happening instead of slapping capacitors everywhere. So
adding capacitors,
yeah.
So Voultar, I mean, as the resident modder of the group, I mean, is this something that you've ever been asked by people to try to remedy the line issue?
It's not, and I'll tell you why. At least in my experience, the line is most prevalent in the 2 PPU systems. You can, of course, see it in a one chip or a mini, but it's very far in between that I've even personally seen the vertical bar in a mini SNES or a 1 chip. But for the most part, until a month from now, I'll be doing actual RGB mods for the 2 PPUs to maybe fix those little girls up. But people really don't care about those because for the most part they want that sharp ASIC 1 chip picture output. So I've not really not many people have approached me about that. Hey, can you fix my blurry SNES? So it's still blurry, but I still have a bar.
See, I've had different results. I've had the first few revisions of the SNES have less of a vertical bar, and then the middle ones have a really prevalent one. And then I think the 1 chip minis were kind of in the middle, they had somewhat of a bar. That's my experience on the revisions that I have in-house.
The first year I was running the site when I was going through all these, I actually remembered the white line as a kid. I remember seeing it, and it drove me nuts. I thought, we hooked it up to 4 different TVs to make sure it wasn't the TV. But the first year I was running the website, every mini in 1 chip I came across had it. And doing the bypass helped a noticeable difference, but it was still kind of there. And then, I've gone through so many SNESes that I don't even know, I couldn't even track those down. And I haven't seen it since, and I'm probably on 20, minimum 20 in the past couple of years. And I haven't run into it at all.
I've probably seen it maybe less than half a dozen times over probably 250 plus 1 chips. That's including a 1 chip and a mini is a 1 chip too. A lot of people try to differentiate the two, but a mini is just a consolidated footprint of the board in a smaller form factor. But I've seen that maybe probably less than 6 times over 250-ish systems. So, I'm sure it's there, but it's just not been a big problem for me in my life.
So let me interrupt here because we have a question from Badass Consoles. Actually, he's in the chat, and he says, maybe this is for Steve, why not bypass the regulator and feed direct 5 volts 2 amps PSU?
Depends on how clean it is.
Oh, just to test it? That's a good way to test it out and see if just to verify that. Or is this a permanent mod he's suggesting?
I'm not sure. He'll have to comment.
I guess one way to know for sure if it's current limiting, instead of using a 2 amp thing, feed 5 volts, 10 amp, just so it wouldn't limit at all, and see if the line completely goes away. That'd be a good test.
Just feed it from a benchtop power supply.
Yeah, just feed it from a benchtop supply or something. I don't know. This is just. I don't have time to test a lot of this, and I'm bringing it up in case people wanted to maybe test it out, try their own things. I don't know.
I would scope the RAM and watch it. That's what I would do. If the theory is, I don't know where that theory where that originates from, but if they think it's the RAM, the RAM pulses or the RAM refresh that's loading up, I would just put a scope on some of those lines and just watch it and just see if it triggers above, an amp or whatever it's supposed to be. I think by default, all SNESs have 1 amp 7805s.
Right.
I think
so.
So I would just monitor that and see if there's a big droop a big spike in the amperage. I may do that, Steve. I may do that for your body.
Just add it to your 57 things on your list for tomorrow.
Zach's not busy at all. He totally doesn't have any problem doing this tonight.
I have time for you. I've got time.
Oh, I know you do.
Oh, that's right.
All right, let's throw it over to Voultar for his topic of the week.
Well, I've been doing, several months ago, I released a couple of different RGB boards, like for the TurboGrafx and PC Engine and the Super Nintendo. But the Super Nintendo is something that actually Bob asked me to do all this stuff. I was happy. I had a good
Did he
laugh.
ask you? Did he ask you, or did he?
No, he actually demanded it. He said,
right, that's what I thought.
Right.
That's what I heard.
He said, I'm going to come to your house and murder everybody in it if you don't do this for me.
And then there was some sexual innuendo. I'm not going to get into that, but I designed a bunch of stuff and released it. And the Super Nintendo stuff, I guess I was going to touch on. While doing something for the Super, by making kind of an RGB thing for the Super Nintendo, the theory has always been, or at least the understanding has always been, that the one-chip SNES outputs like a 0.8 volt peak-to-peak signal off of the analog RGB, off the ASIC, off the one-chip. That's pretty much true. There's maybe like a 30, 45, 50 millivolt variance from console to console, but it's pretty close to 800 millivolts under peak luma. That's all good and fine, but I don't know if anyone's ever really measured the outputs of the onboard encoder, for example. So, in doing this and trying to find the proper attenuation for video, the outputs of the sRGB encoder, it's not a two fixed gain 6 decibel driver in there.
Right.
For example, if you feed it 0.8 volts, you're not going to get 1.6 volts for termination on the outputs. You actually get like 1.8-ish. And people who use the stock encoder, which is perfectly fine, they're attenuating it. They're adjusting the amplitude of these signals to be more termination friendly on the premise that the encoder is a 2 volt or has a fixed gain of 2. So I put up some pictures of some captures from a scope of the sRGB encoder when it's fed 0.7 volts while it's properly attenuated, and the THS like 7314 and 7374, all those video drivers that are 6 decibel to compare. And I don't know, if this is kind of groundbreaking or anything like that, but you can't treat the THS driver the same as you would the stock encoder if you're wanting to get rid of that bright, ringing, ghosting, shimmering picture to correct the video output. Special considerations have to be made.
So basically, what you're saying is that the resistors that we're using, the pull-down resistors, so when we stick the 3 resistors in the RGB holes and then set those to ground, should be different between the THS amps and the stock encoder?
Bob, you're so clairvoyant. That's exactly. Okay. That's exactly what I'm saying.
So I gotta ask the question first, like I always do. Anybody that has these resistors already in there that have done the brightness attenuation, doing it this way, no harm is being done by having the original one in there, correct?
No.
It's just not as perfect as it could be.
You're not harming. Yeah, you're not harming the end device. It's not like sending TTL C-Sync, into a television or to a device that has like a 2 volt voltage supply. It's nothing like that. It's just not going to look right, or it's not going to look as good as it could.
I think not as good as it could is probably the best way to say it then, because I think we've made a lot of strides since the first mods were posted online to make these things look even better than Nintendo made them. But I love that we're still finding like the little tiny tweaks to just make it that much better everywhere as we go. So would you recommend if somebody... Well, I guess if anybody has the ability to change their resistors, it's really, it's very simple. So, and it's cheap. We're talking dollars, not more than that. But for people that have had their consoles modded by somebody else, this isn't something that they should send them out to be remodded with the different resistors, right?
If it looks good to them, if it looks good to them, I'd say just
right.
Don't
I mean,
change.
it's kind of Yeah, I mean, video signals and video standards, they're not arbitrary as much as sound. You know, sound, you can play with things electrically, and what sounds good. But there is a very strict set of standards for video. But we're talking like you're talking, maybe a few hundred millivolts or 100 millivolts. It's not going to be drastic or dire. So if somebody has like an old mod and they like the way it looks, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If it looks good to them on that level, then I don't see there's no reason to go and have that all retooled. It's totally.
It's still awesome that we're still, even now, just finding all these extra little things. Have you found a variance in different models of the Mini? So if you opened up 10 Minis from, with vastly different serial numbers, assuming, of course, the original boards in the original case, is it the same voltage readings off of one on a lower serial number than a higher, or do we not know yet?
Well, like I said, I mean, I've probably, a couple of weeks ago, I doubted myself on a few things, and I just went back. And I did over, I think, 12 or 13 minis, like just all stacked up in the lab. And there was like, at the most, red always reads a little bit lower than GMB, but for the most part, 808 millivolts to 835, 40 millivolts. So there might be, for the most part, a 25, 35 millivolt discrepancy. But I have seen a couple of those be as high as like 860 millivolts.
So should you use a different resistor for red than green and blue then for the attenuation, or is it not close enough?
You're talking like I don't no, not really. I mean, you're talking maybe 15 or 20 millivolts. I mean,
it's kind of what I thought.
You got to take into consideration too, and it's probably in a lot of these equipments, plural. A lot of this equipment, I would actually like to see. I've seen in a lot of equipment. Excuse me, the 75 ohm source, the termination resistors in hardware and stuff. It's like 20%. So
yeah, that always blew my mind. That people are actually not in the mods, but in some of the equipment, there's 20% tolerance. So that's 75 ohm, 20% this way, 20% this way. So you could actually have all of your colors and your brightness be messed up that much because of it. That always was kind of mind-blowing. All the resistors I link to are 1% tolerance, and the only reason I don't go higher is because the difference in price between 1, 5, and 10% is pennies, but the difference between 1% and like a 0.1% resistor is like dollars. So
it's not even that. It's not even just the resistor. A lot of this old equipment uses very basic amplifiers that have non-zero source impedance, and so you could have up to just like 6 to 10 ohms just on the amplifier output plus the 75, and boom, you have 85 out of your source. And so even that could,
there's always going to be a little swing either way. So I mean, you're a few millivolts isn't a big deal really. A couple hundred millivolts, that's when things start to happen. Especially like before, where people were they were impedance mismatching on the outputs of these amps, especially with like the one chip, to darken the picture, to take some of the edge off the brightness. They would replace the 75 ohm series resistors with 100 ohm resistors.
Right.
That's okay. I mean, that's not a horrible deal, but it depends on how well your equipment's going, how well your equipment will agree with it. I don't like it at all. It's an impedance mismatch. You can get reflections that way. You can get all kinds of funny.
I got into an argument with a bunch of people on the forums about this, and I was dead wrong because my perspective, and this was only like a 2 or 3 week thing. It wasn't something that lasted forever, but my opinion on it was, is it going to hurt the console or your display? No, not at all. No way. Okay, so what's the difference? I like it. It looks better, and it wasn't until I think his name is Ultron on the forums. John was like, no, you're not understanding why we're arguing with you about this. You're not getting why we're bringing this up. And he was the one that really explained to me the difference. And then once I tried it myself, I just realized it's not about the brightness. It's about how the signal gets to it. So it's not darker or lighter. It's all of the things that go through that image. It's how clear it is. If there's any signal interference at all, the way the colors look, it was totally different. And it was just ignorance. I just didn't understand. So yeah, that one does bug me now, is when people still stick the 100 ohm on the outputs.
That's not the most dangerous part. And that that's really you might get a shitty picture out of that, but that's not going to do any harm. What will do harm is what a lot of people do still is they'll send a logic level TTL C-Sync signal from the system, and they'll pipe that directly into their device. You have to understand the Super Nintendo, the C-Sync, the TTL level, it's like 4.5 volts, 4.8 volts, 4.5 volts. If you're feeding that into something like a FrameMeister, and Steve looked into this for me. He pulled up the data sheet, and we looked at it together while we were on an expedition. Totally hetero. But he looked into this, and the supply voltage for that chip that intercepts the synchronization is like a 1.8 volts. And I think it has like a 2.2 or 3 volt swing. So I think, what was it, Steve? Like 2.2 volts was basically the max for that chip, and you're sending 4.5 volts?
It was a Schottky diode above 1.8, so it was like 2.1 was the max.
Okay, that's right.
Then it'll start conducting into its diode.
So I just want to be clear about this.
Now, hold on, let me finish this. Finish this. This is important. All right, we don't need. You can commentate in just a second, but this has been going on for too long, people. Look at
PSA. It's a Voultar
this is
PSA.
going on. This has been going on for too long. You think it's fine, but you're not attenuating. You're not making your sinks 75 ohm friendly for the most part. And if you're not, you're sending 4.5 volts into a FrameMeister or into another device. That's not good. You're constantly getting into its ESD protection. You're constantly getting into those protection diodes. And I'm telling you, in 3 or 4 years, maybe 2 years, maybe tomorrow, these FrameMeisters are dying. This equipment is going to stop dying. Stop putting high voltage TTL sync through your FrameMeisters, please. God, I'm done, Bob. I'm done.
That's all I wanted to make sure that you worded it like that, because I know a couple of years ago when I first started out, not only did I not know what TTL was, I didn't grasp that concept. And I think anybody that has even the most basic understanding of electronics, if you tell them you are now putting double the voltage that something's expecting, no one's not going to understand that that's bad, and it's going to damage your equipment.
But okay, yeah.
What'd you say?
Well, no, you're right. But it's like, what is the sync? What is the SCART standard for sync? It's like 200 or 300 is nominal, 300 millivolts to 800 or 900, Steve?
It's 300 nominal, but it lets you drop down to like 215 millivolts and go up to like 950 millivolts.
Okay, so anything in that ballpark is okay. So, but 4.5 volts, and this isn't limited, ladies and gentlemen, this isn't limited to the Super Nintendo. This is for any system across the board. And it's just it's really important, and a lot of people don't take that in consideration, and it's understandable because a lot of that information really isn't even out there. So I've kind of been hounding a lot of people about this, and that's why in my design, for all of my designs across the board, all of my RGB amps, they do this on board. So there's a jumper on there. You can either have TTL, high voltage sync. That's only going to be useful if you have like an Extron device or something like that wants TTL.
But the Extrons will accept both, by the way.
They'll accept both, but it's the only reasonable scenario I can think of to where you would want TTL. Is what I'm trying to say, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me throw a question at you, Voultar, from Drew over at This Old Console. He asks, is it worthwhile using pots in place of the 75 ohm resistors?
No, I don't think so. I think that if you have a good
on the source,
you have a 1%
source.
Yeah,
I think this question came quite a bit ago, so I think he may have been referring to the pull-down resistors, but I'm not sure.
On the termination side, I would just, I would leave it alone. If you're talking about the termination resistors on the end device, like in your TV or something, I wouldn't bother with that. But if you're talking about like the low or the series resistors, just get some 1% 75 ohmers and just put them on the outputs of whatever you're driving. Like if it's on like the outputs of a 7314 or something like that, just use some good 1% resistors. I don't see the real need in.
I think having pots is kind of a messy solution too. I mean, just having to get in there and tweak things is
right.
Not ideal.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
You really want your video signal going through a potentiometer?
I mean, if it's an arcade monitor, that's one thing, because
That's what I was
arcade
about to
monitors
say.
you can do whatever you want to do. But for standard equipment, I just use a good 1%, E27 or whatever. Just use a good 1% resistor. I think that's totally okay.
Cool.
Sorry, I went off on a diatribe.
I'm just glad that Voultar, like, I noticed that difference in the video encoder where it wasn't a gain of 2, and I thought I was going mad, and then I asked Voultar, and Voultar's like, oh, I'm already working on the same thing, and yeah, I think you're I got the same results as you. I'm like, oh, thank God, I'm not senile yet.
Right.
Good finds.
So I think next, maybe in the future, we really need to get to upgrade our graphics package. So, but we did want to do like a myth busting segment on the show. So I don't know if you guys want to get into that, and maybe in the future, once we have a Patreon where people are paying $100 a month to Skype with us for 5 minutes. For the privilege of Skyping with us, we'll be able to afford somebody to do like a big myth-busting animation. But I think this week, this is something that Steve's been wanting to get off his chest for a while, right?
Was it me?
It was you.
I don't know. This all started, or this kind of started because Voultar's like, I got a problem with you, and I'm just gonna let it out. And it was, he posts like a question from our FAQ about like the Genesis 3 mono audio, like you need like an adapter, or you might need an adapter if you want to get mono audio. It's like, what the hell, man? Genesis 3 doesn't even output RGB, so this is bullshit. And I'm like, I was fooled. I'm like, I tested a bunch of them. I didn't find one that didn't do it, and I popped them in, and I had a theory of why people thought it was not working, based on like something we could talk about that in a bit. But then Voultar, like, he's like, he goes on one of his tangents where he opens everything up and starts probing anything. He's like, you're totally right, man. And then we told Bob saw our conversation, and he's like, no, man. No, you guys are totally wrong. I had totally had like a bunch of consoles that didn't work, and then I guess Bob, you went into the store.
Yeah, I was so excited. I thought for sure I was going to be able to prove all of you super smart fuckers wrong. I was so proud. I remember I called Steve from Brooklyn Video Games, and I said, can I just come in? And the dude literally let me sit on the floor of his store, cross-legged, in front of he brought over one of his RGB monitors, and I sat there testing them all, and I had you guys on Skype, and I was ready. I was ready for my moment to be like, fuck you, you're cool, whatever, Canada. But like, and I was dead wrong. And the problem that I had, the reason I was so sure, is because I had a Genesis 3 with it must have come from a really dry area because the multi-out must have been bad. And all I had to do was just add solder to all the pins and it would have been fine. Which is very common that I found on Master Systems, but never on Genesis or especially Genesis 3. And that was the only issue. So all those other mods I've been doing over the years, I open it up, I cut the traces, and then I do the bypass. So for people on people watching, man. I'll try to put a picture up here as well. But yeah, I was dead wrong. All the ones in Brooklyn Video Games, every one of them, completely different board revisions, by the way, all outputted RGB, no problem.
I tell you,
Renee's got one there.
Yeah, I think it's important to mention that this is Bob's Genesis 3 that he sent me, and it does RGB.
when me and Steve got into that, because I saw that on the FAQ, I was like, you guys, what the fuck is this? What is this? And he's like, no, it doesn't, man. It doesn't. I'm like, 2 seconds. 2 seconds. 2 seconds. I go in the garage, and I just quickly zip one apart. I'm looking at it, and I'm like, and I send him pictures. I'm like, here you go. I'm looking right at the 1645 on there, and I'm looking at the RG and B pins off that baby, and they look like they're just floating. He's like, he's like, you see those traces that run underneath 1645? I'm like, what about them? He's like, yeah, I probed those, and there they go, right to the den. I'm like, you motherfucker.
Because that was my original theory. I thought, like, because when you Google Genesis 3 RGB, you get, like, the first page you get is a GameStation X page that's really old, and it looked like to me, what happened to this guy who was talking about a Genesis 3 RGB mod is his cable didn't fit all the way in through the connector because the connector on the Genesis 3 is more recessed than the Genesis 2, so it's harder to get the thing all the way in. And then I thought my next guess was that he opened it up and saw exactly what you saw, Voultar, was, there's nothing coming out of these pins, but they're going the other way under the chip. And that was my theory, and I don't know if that's still accurate. I don't know if it's...
Is Renee going to make love to that Genesis?
well, you know, Steve, you are right, because I have a generic unnamed... It's not unnamed, but I'm not going to name them. SCART cable here for Genesis 2, and it definitely does not plug in all the way.
See.
For Genesis 3, because it's got this huge square head on it. I don't know if you can see well.
Oh,
yeah. That rubs up against the plastic.
That'll do it.
Yep.
So, actually, if anyone has ever seen the HD Retrovision Genesis cable, the arrow that tells you... No, the arrow on the mold that tells you which way is up. We moved that arrow back a little bit just because that little extra amount
is all you need.
Cause clearance issues on a Genesis 3.
So I'm gonna put up the picture for everybody watching, so you could see. You could see how far that cable sticks through into the port.
Get in there.
And
and it works so beautifully with your cable.
Yeah.
There you go. And then I'll show a picture of the outside too, just for anybody that wants to, because it's really, all of the Genesis consoles, it's kind of
see by C71. Those are that RGB is right there below C71. I just want to tell everybody that's RG. Those Vias are for RGB.
Gotcha.
Go F yourself, Steve.
Well, you can see right through here.
You got it.
There's not much room. So, like the Genesis 1, the cable or the whole connector is recessed pretty deep as well, but it's a big opening. Whereas you can see in that picture right there, anybody that has a squared off end to the cable, it's not going to fit in. So, yep.
That's like a decade-old rumor too. That's pretty amazing.
Yep.
And one bag travel referred to this as a shameless plug. I don't know if he was going for the pun there or not, but if he was, that's pretty good.
Was that the same guy that the other day responded to one of your tweets with, "Why don't you shut up and make my cables?" Because I'm not going to lie, I couldn't stop laughing when I read that.
No, I don't think this was somebody else. I'm not sure.
I don't know if they were kidding or if they were
was.
Trolling, but it was really fucking funny.
I don't know. Either way.
He also calls Bob a dirty liar.
Fair enough. So,
He was a dirty liar.
but
Yeah, it was.
Now he's a saint.
there you go.
So Bob, you wanna pull up the next image for the PCB stuff?
I do.
Everything we're talking about, I have right in my hands.
Oh, look at that.
That's what she said.
So what's this group?
The beveled edges.
Here we go.
Oh
guys.
yes, they're rounded. The 90 degrees. Those sharp suckers.
I guess this is another topic that's been burning Steve's britches a little bit.
I brought this up to Bob because we were at MagFest and there was a lot of homebrew stuff at MagFest, and of course, me just being an OCD piece of crap, the first thing I do when I pick up somebody's homebrew cart or repro is I look at the edge of the PCB edge, because I've seen in the past at MagFest, I was trying to tell a guy who was making a homebrew game last year, because he had just the norm. I don't see the image that's up because my thing isn't working. But
shit.
Is there an image up? I don't
there's
know.
the one with 3 on there.
What's the metal one?
There's the one that's just a 90-degree edges. It's just a rectangular edge. And this guy was going to sell cartridges like this, and I'm like, there's a reason why. If you look in every type of cartridge PCB, it has that bevel that makes it go like this, and it's like that on PCI cards. It's like that on everything, and it's there for a reason. It's two reasons: to make it easier to fit, and also to not wear out and damage the connector. because if you're putting that rectangular edge in, you're putting more strain on those contacts that grab the PCB. So you want it to slide in. So like when they test these connectors and they test them for like 100,000 cycles, they're testing them for 100,000 cycles with a bevel normal edge. If you put a rectangular edge in there, it's not gonna last as long. So that's my problem. Was I didn't want people destroying their consoles, and so it's just something I noticed that even people this year at MagFest, there were a lot of carts that had no edge on it. It had just the rectangular edge. It didn't have the bevel on there, and it's something you need to be aware of when you're ordering PCBs. You have to specify it separately, like on a fab notes, or just telling the fabricator, like, hey, I need this angle. It needs to go up to. You make a drawing for that type of structure.
I think we probably should post that drawing somewhere, whether it be on our site or Bob's site or both. Just somewhere where we can. Somebody can, just take that, that drawing that shows the angles of how you would specify it, and they can just take that and copy it and use it themselves if they're going to go to a factory.
Well, it'll be different based on different.
Well, at least as an example, yeah.
Right.
Well, it's also important to note that you see a lot of those Mega Drive. You see a lot of Mega Drive PCBs, like on Oshpark. Oshpark, they prototype stuff, but they don't do beveled edges.
They don't.
So if you're going to buy, and I understand it's in America, it's cheap. Well, it's cheap enough. Just keep in mind, if you buy one of those open source cartridge PCB replacements, that Oshpark doesn't bevel the edges at all. They're going to be 90s.
Right, they're going to be 90s because they don't do the bevel, and it's okay for one-offs. And like I did some one-offs. This is an Oshpark one-off, but I actually grinded the bevel on the cement steps outside.
But you got to be careful there so you don't damage the gold.
Right, yeah. And also the other thing Renee, did you have something?
No, you finish your sentence. And
the other thing is another thing Oshpark doesn't do. It doesn't do the hard electroplated gold. It does. Damn you, Voultar.
How do you pronounce that? What's that acronym?
ENIG. It's the electroless nickel immersion gold. Electroless nickel immersion gold. And Enig, I don't know.
It's a long E. There's only one consonant.
Yeah. But that's a soft gold. That's meant for soldering, like keeping stuff oxidation free for soldering. It's not meant for mechanical abrasion. You need to specify, again, with the bevel, you also specify that you need hard-plated gold on those edge fingers. They call them gold fingers in the industry.
Right.
So you need that to, whenever you're going to have some mechanical thing coming across. You'll scratch out the gold. Like the gold will come off and you'll be left with the copper. I've done it. I have a prototype that I used a lot, and that happened to it, where like the metal thing that mates with it scraped into the gold, and now it's just copper, and now the copper's oxidizing and corroding.
Gotcha. So I have two questions then. On the picture that you sent me that's up on the screen now, the PCB all the way on the left is a perfect square and very obviously bad, the wrong way to do it. The PCB in the middle is beveled on both sides, so it looks like, a little triangle going in.
Yep.
And then the PCB...
That's an official Genesis one, that one.
And the PCB on the right is not beveled on the side with the... or is only beveled on one side. So it needs to be beveled like a V shape on both sides for this to be done correctly, right?
Right, and what I wanted to point out there is there's two types of things I see with this. There's the completely rectangular one where the person designing it doesn't know that it's proper to even specify an edge. And the one all the way on the right is where it looks like they specified an edge, but something happened during production where they forgot to run it through the other side, or the machine screwed up, and nobody QA'd it, QA tested it or looked at it. And so that's the other issue. I've seen it where it looks like it went through a machine, but it didn't go through very good, and nobody checked it. And I think that's the other issue people need to look out for.
So it needs to be on both sides.
Right, yeah, it has to be on both sides. That was just an error. That's a machine error, that it didn't go through the machine right.
Gotcha. And one more question. So, in my layman's brain here, it would make sense to me that this is the case for any time you have a PCB plugging into a connector, not just a cartridge of a video game. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought as well. Because I've seen connectors for different ports not have them. I've seen lots of stuff that you plug into just not have beveled edges. I guess I have a third question. What is then, if you have something like this, like let's say you have a really expensive homebrew that you paid astronomical amounts of money for, and you take a look at it and it's completely square, what is a safe method for beveling it? Do you just take a file? Or
The safest is to ask the person that sold it to you.
I think we both know that's not going to happen.
Renee probably has a better way than I do. I don't think my cement thing is too
I think
risky.
dragging it across the cement, I don't think that's the guide I want to put up on my website, Steve.
No.
I don't think it's going to be a picture of me dragging it across the street in New York to bevel it. But
I'm very
please.
aggressive, but I'm also good with my tools. I use a Dremel to do it, so
okay.
put a Dremel in the vise and I run the board right across it, and I go. I actually have a video of that online, but
I use an emery board. I've used an emery board. Just a couple of really good passes with a long emery board. And
So just finish working on your toes and then whip out the PCB and go nuts on that?
yeah, that's right.
Gotcha.
Gotta
I
look
mean, if
good.
you're really careful too, I mean, there's nothing that could prevent you from using like 300 grit paper and just carefully making a V groove on either side.
So as
You're
long
not
as
gonna be
basically as
anywhere
long as you're
near
not grinding down the
old
metal
contacts.
then,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
you want to avoid nicking that gold metal,
Right.
because if you do, then
It's open
there's
for corrosion.
there's copper underneath, and
Right.
that oxidizes.
Right.
Yeah, there's
So-
about like 2 millimeters or so, right? So you have a couple of passes on the other side.
It's really fast and easy to do. It's not a big deal if you have some. I would probably use like 800 grit or something like that. I don't know.
Gotcha.
But
400
the
I don't know.
thing, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to chime in a bit of my experience on this because I get a lot of PCBs manufactured, and on one of the non-manufacturable layers of the Gerber files, I do specify, bevel and whatnot, and there's the drawing, and it's hit or miss whether the manufacturer actually does it, and I think I've boiled it down to when you get a PCB quoted and made in China, you're probably going through multiple steps, multiple layers of subcontracting before you actually get to a real PCB manufacturer. And I think some of them just don't have the capability to do the V grooving, not V grooving, so beveled. Like you said, Oshpark doesn't do it, right? And so even if you do specify it, you're not always going to get it. So I have to inspect the boards that come in here, and I have to do the beveled manually on a lot of them.
You should inspect. My other point was the people need to inspect it, even if it is specified. Even like on the first one they check, it's beveled. Like the one in Bob's picture that went all the way to the right was a defect, but nobody caught it. So,
Gotcha.
But like Bob, back to your point of like, if it's not beveled, you could do it yourself. There's a good chance if there's no bevel, then the person also didn't put hard gold on the contacts. So. That's just something to remember too.
So
That's why I
I not
suggest
know what a bevel
returning
is.
it.
So I have another question about that, and that kind of segues into something I'd like to just briefly mention. So the hard gold on that versus not. So that's basically to make sure that nothing scrapes away and oxidizes underneath, so that it basically, because once you oxidize, the connections don't mate properly anymore, and then it doesn't.
Well, it's
make
imperative for mechanical connections. So yeah, anything that's there's a mechanical connection between two things, you really want that hard gold on there for that, because things are typically like cycled a bunch of times, whether it be like a connector, like a PCIe card or a game cartridge or an AV connect, anything like that. I mean, you want it to stand the test of time, because yeah, that's all.
So one of the things that I get, and I've gotten, one of the first guides on was, tricks of cleaning cartridges, and I've probably rewritten this guide about 50 times, just because, a lot of, when I first made the website, I never thought it would be international. I never thought other people would be reading it, so I didn't realize that, if a lot of people that don't speak English as their first language read it, you need to be very careful what pictures you put up, because that's what somebody would follow. That's obviously what I would do, too. So one of the guides that I had up was, if you have dirty cartridges that don't work, try it with alcohol first, just Q-tip and rubbing alcohol. And if that doesn't work, use a pencil eraser. And then if that doesn't work, like I had a Mortal Kombat SNES cartridge that was totally fucked. It would not work. I was embarrassed that I even tried to put that in the system. So I used metal polish cleaner, and it worked flawlessly after that. Just Brasso. And as soon as I put that guide up, I just got a ton of emails like, "Oh my God, you can't do that. It's gonna rub off the hard gold, and then the copper will eventually oxidize." So the point that I made was I had a cartridge that did not work at all. It was done. It was dead, ready to throw away, and now it does work. So what's the difference? What's your guys' opinion on that? Is there a better way to do it? Is the pencil eraser a bad thing to do? I don't think it is at all. But and that's just the soft pink side, not on the back of a pencil, literally with the metal there, like one of those, Like, what are you guys' thoughts on that? And and what are your thoughts on if a cartridge won't work at all, just using the metal cleaner on it just to get it up and running?
I'll just say, without going into a lot of detail, I just think Brasso is like a bad thing. I don't like Brasso. I don't think you should ever put Brasso like on an NES cartridge or a Super Nintendo cartridge or any kind of game cartridge and cycle that into a connector a bunch of times, because what that's going to do is that's just going to gunk up your connector. I don't agree with Brasso.
Well, any kind of metal polish then.
I don't like it. I don't like metal polish.
So I think you're having it in steps, like you said, is very important. I think, of course, first step, some type of electronic cleaner, usually alcohol, but usually in electronics they use 99.9% IPA, isopropyl alcohol, and for hobbyists, people who don't have that, just try to find the highest percent you can at the store, which is 90. Usually they sell at the pharmacy. You can get away with that, but ideally you want 99.9. There's also contact cleaner, which is again another specialty thing. So that's step one. Then you have step two, which is the pencil eraser, which is very mild abrasion, right? So you're applying mild abrasion to try to get rid of the oxidation or like the gunk on the contacts, and that's okay. I
fixed like 90% of the cartridges I found that were unplayable.
Right, right. I think those are really good first two steps, and then you're talking about the last resort. Like everything else failed. This thing's trash unless you do something to it, right? Which is exactly what you said. I don't know. I've never had experience with Brasso. I might have tried maybe something more abrasive, like slightly more abrasive, but then you got to be careful of. I've tried a Scotch-Brite pad in horrible scenarios,
right? And
that's a little more abrasion than a pencil eraser, so you have to be super careful. But I've got it where I just rubbed off enough of the gunk and stuff that's stuck there, and the gold was still there, but I didn't expect it under a microscope. I don't know how perfect that was, but I don't know. As a last resort, that's the only thing I could think of, and I'm not an expert on those last resort.
Have you ever considered plating, like corroded, like where there's just pitting in your contacts, plating that with like 60-40 solder or something like that?
No, I don't think I've tried that. That's not bad. Exactly your point, though. Every time I've done this, and I've actually, it's at least 10 cartridges over the years that were dead, ready to throw in the garbage. Immediately after cleaning the contacts with Brasso, I redid it again with high alcohol content rubbing alcohol, because I knew there was going to be gunk on there. So to your point, I totally understand and agree with that. But I just, there's been people that have posted, people that got it, understood what I meant about last resort, and people have said things from sandpaper to, like any. It's really totally
recommended a Dremel flap.
Huh.
He said that works really well
for a last resort.
Idea. Yeah, that's a good idea. Flapper. So as long as everybody that's listening understands that I'm talking last resort, like you're ready to throw your cartridge in the garbage, last resort. So
I would rather use a very, very mild abrasive, like a magic eraser or something like that. That's extremely mild.
Yeah, it didn't do shit. I've tried that before.
Well, I'd rather use that or couple that with a good weak solvent like isopropyl or like a good spirit before putting. Because what you're going to get with any sort of a or metal polish like Brasso is you're going to get a varnish.
Mhm.
You're going to get a layer of varnish on those contacts, and you're being tricked by that. You're thinking, ooh, okay, this is making things work great. It's just making things conduct maybe a little better between the cartridge and the connector. But ultimately, what's going to happen is that varnish it almost caramelizes after a period of time. I've seen this
Even
dozens
after you
of times.
scrub it clean?
I don't know. I mean, it depends on how thorough you are, but I wouldn't take. I mean, I don't know what the point of using a metal. I don't know what the point of using a metal polish would be if you're going to put the material on there to fill in all of the landings and all the pits. If you're going to go and do a second process where you totally remove it all, I think that it's best to just keep the Brasso off the contacts, even as a last resort, because you're trying to fix. In an effort to trying to get one game to be in a pretty okay state of playing, you're going to compromise the life of the connector that you're putting that game in. That's just my opinion, and that's just my opinion.
Interesting.
If you're putting that in your connector and you want to try to get it out afterwards, it's probably very difficult to actually find a solvent that'll get out of there without damaging anything else.
That's exactly right.
I've
Yeah.
experimented on consoles that I knew I wouldn't mind if they died, and I thought I had good results cleaning them like that, even in the cartridge slots themselves, with, making sure to thoroughly do it with alcohol, blow it with one of those, compressed air thing, then go it with alcohol again. But I didn't look at it under a microscope or anything, which I probably, now that I think about it, would be an easy thing to test. So I should think about that.
I want to bring up a product that I bought, and I bought it out of curiosity because the label clearly doesn't indicate what it is. This comes off of a site called More Tough Games. It's called Game Cleaning Paste, and it's this like white solution. And I'm afraid to try it, but I think this is the perfect medium to talk about it right now. And maybe somebody in the chat knows about it. Maybe you guys know what this stuff is. I wonder what it is and if it's actually safe to use it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does it have ingredients on the side?
Does it
No,
smell
it
like
just-
Aquafresh?
Am I going to get a buzz from this?
If Renee passes out, somebody call. Is it 911 in
It's-
Canada?
It smells like ammonia.
It's 912.
It's 912 in
ammonia.
Canada?
Here's the real number.
Well,
912.
the point of that stuff that smells bad is because the point of most of that stuff is to remove, like, people who blow in their games. It's common knowledge now that the pH in your breath and all the corrosives that are in your air vapor, when that touches the finish on these fingers or these edge connectors, it just destroys them, or it can over time. So the point of that stuff is to just really break the corrosive and oxidation stuff down while keeping the metal intact. And the point of using a metal polish or something like that is to fill in like landings and pits and what could be considered, I guess, distressed metal, or metal that's been, that has seen some war. I think that stuff, Renee, is probably okay to use because it probably doesn't leave a lacquer or a varnish residue. That's the problem. It's the residue that's left over on all that stuff, in my opinion.
Voultar, do you think there's trying like an IPA bath like over a long period of time helps, or maybe vinegar over a long period of time?
You know what I would do? That's exactly what I would. I've done that before, and it's pretty excellent, pretty good results from just like taking a quart pitcher or something like that and putting three quarts of distilled or white vinegar to 1 part distilled water. Put in a couple of tablespoons of baking soda and just let the edge connector sit. Submerged, not the whole board, but just
like
the edge
a good
connector.
idea.
That sounds like a better last resort method.
That
I had a
and
rack.
soft connector on the Dremel, I think, have been the two best ideas so far. I like those.
I mean,
Make
if you want to
sure
avoid
it's
the
distilled
abrasive
water.
stuff, yeah,
Yeah,
make sure it's
console's
distilled water.
actually he pasted a link to the one he uses, I believe, and the recommendation he had is use it on a very low speed as far as the Dremel goes.
I like both of those. Those are good. I should update that guide to reflect those then instead of the metal polish. But for the record, if anybody's watching, I still use the games that I've done that method on, and this is 5 years later. So as long as you're careful, Maybe I'm just lucky, but I was very sparing on all the things. I certainly didn't like with the with the Brasso or anything.
You probably didn't jam the cartridge into the connector like 2 minutes after you had.
I most certainly did, actually. I did that on purpose to clean off a really nasty connector as well. And then I soaked that in alcohol, and then I cleaned that, and then that's still working too. But in hindsight, the residue, whatever could be left over, if it hardens over time, yeah, it's probably I probably shortened the life of that connector, to be honest, rather than lengthened it.
I think that I think you do a two-step process where 99.9% of the other people who even use Brasso, they don't go after the fact and wipe they wipe down all the varnish from the Brasso or the metal polish. Yeah. They'll just take a couple of teaspoons of that crap on there, and they'll just rub it into the connector until they can't see it anymore on each side. And like, okay, I'm done. And listen, I mean, I've probably seen 15 or 20 front loaders, especially the 72-pin connectors, where I was able to restore them, but you could just see all of the gunk in between the pins, and you could smell it, and you could literally still smell that metal polish finish in the connector, where people cleaned 70 games and they didn't wipe it down or they didn't remove it, and their connector was just, ugh.
Yeah, the goal here is to make these things last as long as possible. So if my method works, but it shortens the life of a connector, I don't want to do it anymore. Even if it's fine, I still would rather use a method that doesn't do that. So, yeah, I want to change that guide then. Good call. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Well, let's wrap it up there. We're sitting at an hour 15 minutes. I think maybe we request from the people who are listening that this will be on the YouTube page as a saved video. And so if there's something in the future for next months that you're interested in us talking about, some kind of topic, just comment on the video. If you have any suggestions or anything like that about the format of this, we'd love to hear that too.
The more feedback, the better, because we tried to keep it more of basic for everybody. I fought all my urges to just nerd the fuck out and start talking about calculations and different things, but what are you guys most concerned with? What do you want to hear? What did we do wrong? Do I suck? Do you want more Renee, less Bob? Whatever it is, post down below.
That's right.
We'll
And the other thing is we dual stream this across Twitch and YouTube. So, I mean, how do people feel about that? I really struggled to kind of bounce back and forth, and I basically focused all my attention on the Twitch chat room just because there were more people in that one. So I don't know if maybe next time we just do Twitch, or if people still want it to be on YouTube. That's totally fine, but we just let people know ahead of time that we're going to mainly focus on one chat. Just anything like that, just give us comments and let us know what you want out of this. Definitely. And I think we'll keep trying to do this once a month going forward.
Absolutely. Any topics you want us to talk about? I know there's a big one we want to talk about next time, but that one's we'll wait. What was it? Not spoilers. Teaser for next time. There's a big one we'll talk about. So, all right. Anybody else got anything to mention or say?
I just think people should just say like what their Twitter handle is, where they could find more info. And Voultar, you go first.
What the hell are you talking about, Steve? Oh, my Twitter handle? I don't know. What is my Twitter? Voultar's Mod Shop. That's Voultar Mod Shop. You can find me on the Twitter. And
you have a website, and are your products in stock, Voultar?
Bob, first of all, I know this is supposed to be PG-13, but go fuck yourself. Number two, tomorrow morning, ladies and gentlemen, high-def stuff has been absolutely... I've done way too many of those things. It's taken over. But tomorrow morning, I'll have a good, rich, deep inventory stocked on the website. So I will service your bodies tomorrow.
Okay.
How about
That's
you, Bob?
Voultar.com. Voultar.com.
You, Bob?
I am RetroRGB on everything. So, Facebook, Twitter, Instashit, whatever else, just find me on that. And, and RetroRGB.com.
Renee?
I'm best place to reach me is on Twitter. My handle is DB_electronics. What does DB stand for? I don't know. good question. Also have a website, db-electronics.ca, and unlike Voultar, I do have some products in stock. The others are being manufactured.
Oh,
Let me
Renee,
put
I'm
in a
sorry.
shameless. Let me
I
put
got a
in a
cue
shameless
there.
plug for Renee. He's starting to put a lot of open source stuff up on his website, including some cartridge 3D printed stuff.
There's a STL file modifiable on Tinkercad for Sega Master System, Sega Genesis, a cutout for Sega Genesis that'll fit my FM power base. There's a cartridge shell. I found one yesterday for Sega Saturn, and it's open source. I'm going to post it on there too.
Cool.
And I have a lot of open source projects on GitHub. I'm trying to do it right. There's a correct way of doing open source.
Gotcha.
And Steve doesn't have social media. I mean, he's barely literate with computers.
I'm off the grid. If you have my phone number, you can call me on my flip phone. But
don't try to reach Steve. He lives in a bus down by a river next to some mountain somewhere, so you can't even get to him. He's a real survivalist. But you can get to me at HD Retrovision on Twitter. We're also on Facebook. But I would say, like Renee said, Twitter is a little bit better place to reach out to us.
Gotcha. All right, that's it. Well, here goes the first episode of the podcast. This is pretty cool. I'm glad we did this. So Retro Roundtable coming sometime next month for episode number 2.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care, guys.
All right, guys. It was fun, as always.
Bye.